Here we have our 2002 Toyota Camry again. It's hitting about 190,000 miles, so there's a variety of things I need to do to this car, one of which is replace the CV axles. So there's two of them, one's longer than the other, and when you get into the car you can kind of see why. What I'm here to talk about specifically is there's some other videos on YouTube that kind of talk about it. None of them dealt with this castle nut with a retainer that had an indent in it, so that actually was a bit of a pain to try and get that off. And because that's threaded, if you mar that up and mar those threads up, what you'll do is you'll mess up threads on the whole axle like I did. That sucked, and luckily that axle sucks also, so not too worried about that. Tools that were mentioned, obviously you got 17 millimeter. You're going to want a fork to take the tie rod out, a breaker bar if you can, and obviously impact tools help. But what I'm really here to talk to you about, this is the side of the axle that goes into the transmission, and it's got this clip on it that kind of retains it in place so it can't easily slide out. Well, getting that out was a bit of a pain, and people on YouTube have talked about different ways to do that. They'll talk about a crowbar and trying to get a crowbar in here against a block and prying that out. They've also talked about clamps, doing clamps, whether it be a whale jaw vise or pipe wrenches or C-clamps, and hitting it with a hammer trying to get it to pop out. I had no luck with either of those. So the idea that I had was we want to pull and we want to get sufficient force, so we want it kind of like a slide hammer. So what I did is I spent about 15 bucks. I picked up some cable and a couple fittings, and you can see I got one end looped around a maul. The other end is basically just kind of lassoed or noosed around, and it took two moderate swings and that thing popped right out. So happy days, man. That worked really well. And it provided the exact style. You can tell you lose a little bit of differential fluid when you do this. You got to top it off, but it provided the exact amount of force necessary to safely pop that thing out. So yay, this worked wonderful. I just figured I should probably share it because I hadn't seen anybody come up with that solution yet, and it was by far the cheapest, easiest, and safest instead of being down there beating on it with a hammer. As mentioned in other videos, I'll just explain it to you. You have to get the lower control arm off, so there's two 17 millimeter nuts and then a 17 millimeter bolt. Both of those are fairly tricky. And then you obviously have your tie rod end you got to work off as well. That's also 17 millimeter. You don't have to take the brakes off if you don't want. Obviously you don't have to take the strut off. It really is just those bolts. This is 30 millimeter on this car. The replacement's 32. It was a 12 point, so I did have to buy a 30 millimeter 12 point and a 32 millimeter 12 point for the new one. You can rent them if your store has them in stock. But anyway, figured I'd share that. It worked fantastically. So if you have any questions, just let me know.